During Bach's tenure in Leipzig, he got to work with a virtuosic musician who served as his chief trumpeter. His name is Gottfried Reicher, whose portrait is now displayed at the Old City Hall in Leipzig. Today, Dr. Michael and I are visiting Dr. Anselm Hartinger, the director of Leipzig City History Museum. We will discover stories of Bach's chief trumpeter and learn about the musical life in Leipzig during Bach's time.
This is Johann Gottfried Reicher, Bach's first trumpet player.
He is the highest ranking town musician.
Yes. So many speculations around this round trumpet.
So what do we call it?
We don't know. Some people say it's a kind of a corno da caccia, but it is. Many people say it's actually a trumpet in a round form.
It's an ongoing discussion for decades.
We don't know whether this instrument really existed. So, in what sense? It's not a valve trumpet. It's also not a slide trumpet. So we have a reconstruction here by Friedbert Zühe, but we don't know whether it works.
And a poor guy, in a way that he was the one who had to premiere all these pieces Bach composed in the 1720s and 30s. So, I mean, look, pieces like Christmas Oratorio, he was considered as one of the best trumpet players, at least in Saxony. But here's the funny story. He died maybe because of Bach's music. Because when the Bachsche Collegium Musicum performed a congratulation cantata for the Saxon prince who was in town. I think it was in the night itself or the morning after, they found him on the street. So he died suddenly. And
by a stroke.
By a stroke. And it was written in the newspaper that some people said that was because the music the night before was so exhausting for him. And that was a score by Bach.
It was President Glücke, Gesegnete Sachsen.
You're right.
Very heavy piece. But to be fair to Bach, he was over 70. He was an old man because they had no retirement option. There was no pension system, so everybody played until the death knocked on his door. We have some compositions of him, the 24 Quadriviginia from the late 17th century, and that is not of Bach's quality, but it's really major music, wonderful 4-part music for 3 trombones and 1 cornetto, which was the daily life instrumentation of the Leipzig town musicians. So they played from the balcony of that building. So they played from every day at 10 o'clock at the Hora Decima. they stood on the balcony and they played for the people there a chorale or one of his sonatas. So this is really
there was always a lot of music going on in
inside
18th century Leipzig. Remember, they had these music from the town pipers, down from the town hall. There were the boys from St. Thomas going through the streets, singing in order to collect money.
It is the musicians' loft. It's a special gallery where the town musicians had to stand and play music when this room has been used for state ceremonies, for weddings, for ceremonies of the guilds and all these things. And we can assume that Johann Gottfried Reicher, Caspar Heinrich Gleditsch and all these other town musicians stood there and played their music, trombones, cornetos, probably violins. It's a very slim gallery. It's not good for a huge belly there.
Not enough space for a Bach cantata.
No space for a Bach cantata. But it is nice that we still have this inside gallery, and outside the building is a huge balcony, and it has been used for the daily playing of a sonata or a chorale. So that's really a music place here in the Old Town Hall.
The instruments during Bach's time are quite different from the orchestral instruments as we know them today. The modern flute, for example, is made of metal, but the Baroque flute, along with the Baroque oboe and bassoon, are made entirely of wood. The natural trumpet is the most commonly used brass instrument in Bach's compositions. The natural trumpet does not have valves, and therefore, even though the length of its tube is twice as long as the modern trumpet, it is only able to play the note of the harmonic series, which usually lingers on the higher register and is extremely challenging to play. As for the Baroque strings instruments, gut strings are used instead of the metal strings, and the bows are much shorter than the modern ones. In addition, chin rest and shoulder rest were only invented in the 19th and 20th century. Therefore, not only do Baroque instruments look and sound differently from the modern ones, but their playing techniques and styles are also quite distinguishable.
So David, follow me to a room.
Oh my.
Come on.
Okay.
Full with instruments from Bach's Leipzig period. And actually my favorite here is this double bass, a very massive instrument which has a very, very long Leipzig story. It was bought in the middle of 17th century, I guess in the 1670s in Prague. It was used in St. Nicholas Church here in Leipzig for more than a century. Mm-hmm. So in other words, I guess this is an instrument which took part in the premiere performance of St. John Passion, of many of Bach's cantatas.
So here we have a smaller version. It's a violin d'amore.
Yeah, that's a violin d'amore. You know that Bach liked this kind of instrument because of its very sensitive sound. Mm-hmm. You know, some really impressive arias by Bach where he used this instrument.
The duet in St. John Passion, Erwäge. Actually, my most favorite one is the Arioso, Betrachte meine Seele.
Most of these instruments were built by the Leipzig violin builder Hoffmann. Bach used to buy his instruments from Hoffmann, so he acquired many new instruments in the late 1720s.
I heard that some wind instruments were only famous during Bach's time and for Bach's work, and you don't see them very much in other compositions. Is that right?
That's right, and maybe the most famous one is the oboe da caccia.
Yeah.
So the oboe built for the hand. Yeah. So and it has a very, very special wooden sound. You know that Bach used it very often in his passions and his cantatas. Some scholars argued that Bach himself actually invented the instrument.
Right.
I'm not quite sure about this.
Have we seen any of this instrumentation, for this particular instruments in other composers' works?
Yeah. There are evidences that other composers, contemporary composers, used it. A Leipzig oboe builder named Eichentopf, Johannes Eichentopf, invented the instrument in the early 1720s, and the big question is, did Bach stimulate him to invent this, or was it more or less by accident that Bach came across this invention by Eichentopf, loved the instrument, and started composing for it pieces on a regular basis in his cantatas? That's something we don't know for sure. So,
and then of course nowadays we replace that when we use a modern instrument, we play it on an English horn.
Yeah.
Just a different instrument.
Yeah, it's definitely a different instrument. So the sound of an original oboe da caccia is very special.
Today we see musical ensembles of all sizes all around the world performing Bach's music. But what was the exact size of a Bach choir or Bach orchestra? And did Bach have an ideal number of instrumentalists and singers that he would like in his group? Back at Bach-Archiv Leipzig, Dr. Manuel Bärwald and I are looking at the original performing part of a Bach cantata, as well as an important document written by Bach himself in regards of the performance practice of his music.
This is a cantata for the first Sunday in Advent, composed within the cantata, chorale cantata cycle in 1724. Komm der Heiden Heiland. Do you know this piece?
Of course I do. I have conducted it several times.
Well, we can look into this manuscript.
So this is very different from our modern vocal score, where we can always see 4 parts going on at the same time in a vocal score, but at the time there's just one specific part written for soprano and then one for the alto I see here.
Yes, all the singers could only see what's going on in the music in their own part, and they cannot see what the instruments are doing or the other vocal.
Now what is so fascinating to me is that both the chorus and the solo part is written on the same piece of paper. So that tells me that the soloists also sing in the choir.
Yes, they did.
And then my understanding is that we only have one copy of the tenor part, of each part.
Sometimes the violins are doubled, and then we have
duplicate.
Yes.
Okay.
We have duplicates, but never for the vocal parts.
Is it possible that, like some scholar, they have said that Bach cantata, they perform one singers per part?
Well,
because we only have one vocal part.
Well, this is possible, but it's not like Bach intended his music to be played and sung.
How do we know Bach's intention?
So he wrote a letter to the Leipzig Town Council and explains very detailed how many musicians he needs to perform a proper church music. So it's called Kurzer, jedoch höchst nötiger Entwurf einer wohlbestallten Kirchenmusik. So short but most necessary draft on how church music should be performed. In every choir there should be at least 3 sopranos, 3 altos, 3 tenors, and as much basses.
So 3 basses, basically. It says 2 to 3
first violins, 2 to 3 second violins, 2 violas, 2 violoncello, 1 violone, 2 oboes, 1 or 2 bassoon, 3 trumpets,
and 1 timpani.
Yes.
So when a piece that's without trumpet and timpani, so we're talking about, with the continuo player or Bach himself playing at the keyboard, then the orchestra is as big as 15 people.
Yes.
So maybe on a feast day when there's a timpani and then there's the trumpet. So the Bach orchestra, it would be safe for us to say that around 18 to 20 people, not more than 20 people.
Absolutely, yes.
So singers-wise, if it says that ideally is 3, yet better, yet 4 people.
Yes.
Right? So then that would be
12 to 16, yes.
So the entire group would be, we're talking about a little bit more than 30 people.
Yes. And the choir couldn't be much bigger because there were 55 singers in the St. Thomas Boys choir, and they not only have to perform on Sundays in one church, they have to perform in St. Thomas Church, and St. Nicholas Church, and New Church, and St. Peter's at the same time.
And then we know that back then people get sick very often.
Especially in the winter.
That's why he wrote that letter, because it is in his ideal world, practically not in the real world. Probably sometimes he end up with 2 singers per part, or maybe even 1 on some Sunday.
Yes.
Today, there are more historical informed performances of Bach's music than ever. The numbers of early music ensembles from around the world are rising, and each are trying to recreate what they think is closest to the performance practice at the time by using period instruments and smaller performing forces. On the other hand, many people are more familiar with Bach's masterworks being performed by a symphonic choir and large orchestra, a tradition which probably dates all the way back to 1829, when Mendelssohn revived Bach's St. Matthew Passion in Berlin. Usually when we go to concert hall today and see this concert and Bach is being performed by a large orchestra with a large choir, and this tradition really did not come from Bach himself, but came from the revival during Mendelssohn's time.
the 19th century was a time of, dreaming and of creating these idols, these heroic figures. Like Beethoven was another one. He was really kind of put on this pedestal, and that's why Brahms didn't even compose a symphony for such a long time, because he didn't even feel like he could possibly get close to what Beethoven did, because everybody was putting them so high up. And that's kind of what they did with Bach. They put him so high up as this master, which we kind of still do today, and there's good reason for it. But I think that probably influenced also the performance practice, this whole idea of really putting somebody up on a pedestal. So maybe you added more singers than Bach maybe even had the means of having, but maybe he didn't even envision it like that. But it makes for such a almost kind of a religious effect of having this big mass of people singing. Whether that will stay, we don't know. It could be that we change gears.
Where we're seeing that Bach is performed by less and less people, and even maybe one instrument and one singers per part.
Right.
But still, I think it's very meaningful for a big group of people coming together just to experience Bach by performing it. I think that is another way to appreciate Bach, although it might not have been what Bach would have intended to be.
Well, but in the end, is that the most important thing? Because, Schumann definitely said, the most important thing is to do it the way that the composer intended. But on the other hand...
Well, he was playing Bach on the piano,
yes,
which didn't exist during Bach's lifetime.
And he was enjoying Bach in his way, and other people enjoy Bach in their way. So I think that's it's valid either way. If you're appreciating his music, then that's the important part.
And the great thing is Bach music sounds great no matter how you perform it.
Yeah.
On behalf of Bachfest Malaysia, thank you for joining me on Encountering Bach. If you have not done so, please be sure to subscribe to Bachfest Malaysia's YouTube channel and Facebook page so that you won't be missing out on our videos.